Hello everyone, welcome to Activate the Youth Vote. My name is Sinan Kassim. I'm the founder of the Kassim Legacy Foundation, which works in over 5 countries to create a sustainable and pluralistic world. And I've interviewed many of our government leaders at the local, state, and national level. And I love working with our elected officials in Florida to bridge our youth and our communities together. Activate the Youth Vote is a platform for 15 youth leaders from across the country who are joining me on this mission to increase youth voter participation and to increase the overall voter turnout on November 3rd. We're going to show the adults on national TV how to have a respectful conversation. Even though we come from different ends of the political spectrum, we have different backgrounds, and we have different values. Our generation's objective is to take a stand, a united stand, behind making sure that everyone gets out to vote. If you need any voting resources and information, the 4 of us are ambassadors for getting out to vote, and all of the other panelists will be joining us, and you can definitely go to iwillvote.com. Now, I know, and we all know, that there's a lot of polarization and divisiveness in our politics. So this is not a platform for that. This is not a platform to push a political agenda or any particular candidate. This is a platform to excite and energize all of our voters. So while we may refer to some elections and races, we are not promoting any candidates today. But we will be learning a lot about the great panelists who are with me today. And so, without further ado, our first panel out of 5, which will help us launch Activate the Youth Vote, starting with Noah Fineberg. He's an associate strategist at Progress for Florida, LLC. He served as the deputy political director in Broward County for Andrew Gillum's 2018 gubernatorial campaign, and he ran his first mayoral race when he was in high school. He's been a great mentor and friend to me, and I'm so excited to hear his insight. Second, we have Logan Rubenstein. Logan is the Deputy Advocacy Director for March for Our Lives. He's the chapter lead in Parkland, Florida for March for Our Lives, and he goes to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and he's worked on campaigns on the local and the state level. Thank you so much, Logan, for being here today. And last but definitely not least, we have Raymond Adderly. Raymond is on the Technology Advisory Board for the Broward County School Board. He's the president of his class at Fort Lauderdale High School. He plays a digital role with the Biden campaign in Broward County, and he is an exceptional youth activist and leader for his peers. Thank you so much to the 3 of you for joining me today and us on this mission. Now, we've had many of our viewers and youth reach out from before, asking us if each of you can go into specifics about your work, your advocacy, and your civic engagement, and I'm not going to take that away from them. So, Noah, if you'd like to go first and tell us a little bit more about your work.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Sinan, for having me. It's great to be back with you. Great to see you, Raymond and Logan, as always. The work that I do is purely and strictly campaign-based for the most part, I would say. I work for a variety of candidates who are running for offices at all levels, starting with city council races in some really, really small towns, all the way up on to races that cover the entirety of Broward County, one of the largest counties in the entire country. And what can be learned from that experience, certainly working on all those campaigns, besides for the areas of policy and the issues that are directly related to the race, is the issues that matter to voters. Because especially when we get on this local level, the issues that matter to voters are not Republican or Democrat. They're not one party or the other. There's not a Republican or Democrat way to fix a pothole. There is one way to fix a pothole. And so what people are looking for in their leaders, especially their local community leaders, are people who bring solutions to the problems that they have. That is what government and that is what service is supposed to be about. Here at the University of Florida, we have been working diligently over the past couple of weeks with the Bob Graham Center for Public Service, along with one of our student government agencies, Chomp the Vote, on promoting voter registration before last week's deadline and then now are working on activating those same programs to get people to the polls on November 3rd. And we have a lot of exciting stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks as we get ready for early vote here on campus.
Thank you so much, Noah, for that introduction and for being here today. Logan, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you so much. Also want to mention for my first campaign, Noah is actually like my advisor, my mentor. So like Noah definitely knows what he's talking about with that stuff. But thank you guys so much for having me on. My name is Logan Rubenstein. I'm a junior in Stillman Douglas High School. And you know, after the shooting, I knew I had to get involved in some way. You know, seeing a movement basically get sprung up in my backyard. I was in 8th grade during the time, and I knew that I couldn't do anything then because I was only a 13-year-old in 8th grade. But I had to get involved in some way. And so since I've got involved with March for Our Lives, I serve as the president of the local chapter here, and also the policy director, or the deputy policy director, sorry, of Marcellus, Florida. And so, you know, with that work in the community and also statewide, and also just my own personal capacity working in local campaigns for some progressive races here in Broward County, you know, it may not seem like your vote matters, maybe one vote, but it does. You know, the people we elect, the people who serve us for our community and countywide and statewide, there's a lot of some pretty iffy characters out there, especially in the Florida legislature. And so, you know, with the work of Marcellus Parkland, you know, as the president, you know, really working to, in a nonpartisan way, working to uplift the young people in our communities. So, you know, educating on how important these races are, you know, mobilizing young people of the importance of voting, and just trying to get young people like me involved in the political process, because, you know, it matters. Who we elect as a city commissioner, like Noah said, it matters. You know, also in the work in the legislature as the policy director or the deputy policy director for Florida. I mean, so we do back in November 2019, we laid out a whole legislative agenda of bills that had to get passed to prevent gun violence in the state of Florida. And so, you know, the legislature has been dominated by one party for years, and so we couldn't get too much traction on that. But, you know, as young people getting involved in these issues and standing up for what we believe in, and we're trying to make a difference, even if we're just chipping away at the edges. And so by voting, even though it might not feel like that much powerful, these local races get decided by literally hundreds or 200 votes sometimes, and it makes a difference. And so, you know, definitely make sure that you know who's on your ballot in November. Make sure that you're registered to vote. Make sure if you're voting by mail, you have everything in check. And young people, I mean, we got to get out there and vote, because I mean, you know, if we make a difference, if you vote and you get 20 of your friends to vote and they get 50 of their friends to vote, that's the margin right there for local races. And so we got to get involved. We got to educate ourselves, and we have to get involved in this fight, because there are definitely some people who've been voting for centuries, and they kind of forget, or even like legislatures, like they forget like that we matter. And so we have to show them we matter by going out to the voting booth and also holding them accountable when they do some bad stuff.
Thank you, Logan. Raymond?
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. Let me tell you, the consequence of this election and so many elections like it going forward are so very important. But like Sinan said, my name's Raymond Adderly. I serve on the Broward County Technology Advisory Committee as a member for District 3 and in Broward County, Florida, and the Broward County School Board. I serve as class president at the Fort Lauderdale High School class of 2022. And that's the largest class Fort Lauderdale High School has ever seen, and I'm honored to be their president and to be their voice, as well as I'm honored to represent the students in District 3 on the Technology Advisory Committee. And lastly, the last thing I'd say that I do is I am responsible for so many things as far as the Biden-Harris campaign. I'm a fellow in Region 14, which is Volusia County, trying to ramp up the vote in the I-4 corridor, working in New Smyrna Beach. I am a digital fellow with the Gen Z outreach team. I am a digital leader with Broward for Biden. as well as a digital leader with Cubano con Biden, which is a sect of Todos con Biden, which is our Hispanic outreach community. Let me tell you the consequences of this election and some of the advocacy that I stand for. As class president, I stand strongly for the equitable representation of every student underneath me that I am entrusted to represent, as well as increasing the amount of funds we have for every student at Fort Lauderdale High School. And I do as much as I possibly can. I don't sleep at night until I have a plan to ensure that every student at Fort Lauderdale High School is represented effectively by me and by my administration. I don't sleep until I know that the students at Fort Lauderdale High School have a low income, a low cost prom in senior year. They don't have to go out and spend crazy costs to afford memorable events like prom and senior dances and stuff like that. On the Technology Advisory Committee, I ensure that every student in Broward County, under the superintendent and under the student advisory, under the student advisor, I ensure that they are represented so that the school board knows that computers are not working, that more computers need to go out. And while it might sound like a minuscule issue, it affects so many students across this district. This is the 6th largest district in the United States, and every student in Broward County deserves a free right to public education. And with that public education needs to come the costs that come with it. And that is Wi-Fi at home. That is computer devices issued by the school. And that's the type of advocacy I bring to that Technology Advisory Committee. And last but not least, I also am, with the Biden campaign, there's a plethora of issues that I can tell you about. But most importantly, this election is not a referendum against President Trump's administration. It's a referendum against the issues that Gen Z faces in the future. It's a referendum that we can have climate change activism in the White House. It's a referendum that we can have schools where we can go where we're free from having the threat of being targets, lame ducks in our schools. It's a referendum against the fact that we need to have affordable college, that when we leave school, we're not bogged by debt for the rest of our lives. There's so much that we can talk about, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you. And that's some of the advocacy. That's what I do, and that's what everyone here on this call does. And I'm so excited to be a part of this.
Thank you so much, Raymond, and thank you to each of you for being here on this mission to activate the youth vote. I want to reiterate again that this is about unity, this is about bipartisanship, and this is about coming together to support everyone voting in races up and down the ballot. Now for today's format. We've had many questions submitted from youth and from the audience and the viewers at home, so we're going to be asking many of those questions to our panelists. But this is not an interview. I'm not going to ask Noah one question and then ask Raymond and Logan another. This is not an interview. This is a conversation. So the way in which it'll work is that I'm going to ask a question directed at one of the panelists. Then the other two can jump in and add their own insight into that topic. Once we've covered that topic, then we'll move on to the next and the next, and as many topics we can get to in the hour. The first question is for Raymond. Raymond, do you and your family have a plan to vote? And how are you encouraging other voters to get out and cast their ballot?
Well, thank you, Sinan. That's an amazing question, and it's very provoking indeed. Like I said, I am on a team of eager Biden and Harris supporters. I am on a team that is eager to get out the vote for Democratic elected officials up and down the ballot in Broward County and across the state of Florida. So I think it would be pretty hypocritical if my family didn't have a plan to vote or I wasn't assisting others to do the same. Let me tell you, like I said, this election is so consequential, and my family does have a plan to vote. My mom, my aunt, and everyone doesn't trust the mail-in ballot system. So they will be voting in, excuse me, 1 second, I do apologize. 1 second, please.
No worries. In the meantime, Noah, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just checking this morning, and I'm happy to report that my ballot was not only received by the Broward Supervisor of Elections, but was in fact counted. One of the things that I've been working on here at the University of Florida is encouraging many students to register within Alachua County. The only reason I have not is that I serve on I serve with the Broward Democratic Party as a precinct committee man, so I'm required to have my registration in Broward County. But if I wasn't, and what I do for many of my friends and colleagues is to encourage them to register in Alachua County. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is we've seen this year with the controversy surrounding mail-in ballots and whether or not the Postal Service is capable of withstanding the sheer volume of mail-in ballots that are going to be requested in this election. And so it's very reassuring to students when we tell them you don't have to worry about the mail-in ballot system. You don't have to worry about if your signature matches or dealing with any of that. We have the solution for you. Years ago, the University of Florida established a partnership with the Alachua County Supervisor of Elections to make our student union an early voting location where any student at the University of Florida is allowed to go vote. So I'm encouraging many of my friends, classmates, and colleagues to switch their registration or to register to vote for the first time here in Alachua County, and then participate during the early vote process at our student union, which is accessible, which is easy, and you don't have to deal with the hassle of mail-in ballots.
Thank you, Noah. I invite Raymond or Logan to jump in and build on Noah's comments.
Yeah, so I actually cannot vote yet. I'm only 16 years old, so I'm not voting. So my plan is that, I'm getting my entire family to vote. So that's my parents, and my grandparents and my aunts and my uncles. And basically, so what I do is I did this in the August primary as well, is I basically went to the Broward Supervisor Elections website, and I printed out the sample ballots, and I highlighted all of the candidates that I support. If I could vote, I would be voting for them. And I gave them to my grandparents and my parents so that I can't vote, but 4 people voted for the people I support, so it's like kind of a vote. And also like making a plan for like all my family to vote. So my family's plan this year is to vote early in person. It isn't an incredibly big risk to go in person during early vote. There isn't a huge line, at least what I saw in the primary. Things can change in the general election. A lot more people will be voting. But if you wear a mask, if you stay 6 feet, it is safe. Obviously, if you're immunocompromised, request to vote by mail ballot and vote at home if you don't want to go outside. But that's my family's plan of voting this year. Is we're gonna be voting early in person and getting the sample ballots for my whole family.
Great. Thank you, Noah and Logan. And Logan, just like you, I'm 16. I can't vote yet, but that's why I feel the need to want to encourage my family and everyone else to vote, because they're voting for our future. Even though we're 16 and can't vote yet, you're voting for our future, and there are so many issues and so many topics that are at stake in this election up and down the ballot. So I can't thank the 3 of you enough for being here. I think Raymond may be having some technical issues, so we'll move on to the next topic, and if he comes back, then that'll be great. The next question is for Noah. Noah, tell us about a moment in which you realized the importance of voting and civic engagement.
Wow. The first time I received, I went to vote. So the first time I was able to vote was in the general election in 2018. And as you mentioned before, I was working for then candidate at the time, Andrew Gillum. And it's the first time I was voting. And I really wanted to vote on election day. I wanted to vote at my precinct, which was at my elementary school. I had been going with my parents for as long as I could remember with them on election day to vote. But unfortunately or fortunately, I was going to be in Tallahassee the day of the election, so I knew that wasn't possible. So I did the very next best thing for the first time I ever cast my vote, which was go during the early vote to our local library. And stepping into that voting booth with that paper and looking down and realizing that I was playing a role in democracy. From the top of the ticket in the Senate and gubernatorial elections all the way down to our elections for city commissioner. and everything in between. There was something so profound about marking that paper, about turning in that ballot, about receiving that I voted sticker, and about walking out of that building with the pride of knowing that this is the greatest experiment in human history. Close to 300 years a long experiment of democracy at work, and I got to be a participant. That was that moment walking out of that building when I really fully got to appreciate the power of my vote.
Noah, that was incredibly well said and inspiring, and I think that should convince everyone to go out and vote. So that was excellent, and thank you for sharing that. So the question was, tell us a moment in which you realized the importance of voting and civic engagement. So Raymond or Logan, if you want to tell us that moment for you.
Sure thing. So I am back, everyone. I do apologize. Look, when I realized how important it was to become engaged civically, I probably was really young. I've never cast a vote yet, except in my own personal, student body and student government elections, obviously. And all of you know what that's like. Look, when I realized that civic engagement was important, it's what has compelled me to live a life of advocacy and advocate on behalf of others who can't do it for themselves. It's what inspires me every day to be a lawyer and to get involved politically, not just on getting out the vote level, but actually being the one to make the laws that govern society and that help people. And so when I realized that I wanted to become engaged more than ever in this election in particular, not only was it because of my great respect of the Democratic nominee, but it was also because of my great respect for this nation. And when I look and I see what's happening around this country, I see values that were once looked upon as a good thing, now looked as a bad thing. When I see things that were once things that we could all look up to, and when we all could look up to the president, we all could look up to the White House to find dignity and to find honor and to find what this country meant. When I saw that all disappearing, I knew that this was not an election that I could stand idly by. I knew this was an election I couldn't just let, work the process. I knew I had to get involved because there's so much at stake. And look, I mean, we can say anything we want to say, but we all know the truth. We all know what this election entails. Everyone on this live knows what the election entails, whether you are for Trump or whether you are for Biden. It doesn't matter. Both parties have a platform and both parties want to get civically engaged. But what do you subscribe to? Either way or the other, whether you subscribe to either side, here's the problem. You have the opportunity to make your voice heard, like I do on this platform, like I do when I stand in front of the superintendent, like I do when I stand in front of my principal. You have the opportunity to do the exact same thing. And whether you're sitting in your living room around family or in the secluded ballot box or polling station, you have the opportunity to make your voice heard. And that's what inspired me more than anything to get involved civically, because I understand completely what it's like to advocate for others. And I love the power that one person can feel when they can advocate for themselves. And that's by voting.
That was well said, Raymond and Noah. Logan, would you like to tell us about a moment or follow up on what the other two have said so far?
A moment when voting was powerful?
A moment in which you felt the power of being civically engaged or voting, if there was ever a moment for that for you.
Ooh. So first two things that come to my mind. I guess the first one is so over the summer I worked on Joe Kimmock's campaign for Broward County State Attorney. I put in a lot of work, like almost 3 months straight, like working the campaign. And so I remember on election night we ended up losing by I think a point and a half. But just that moment, like filled with everyone like working the campaign, just like talking about like what we accomplished and what we did. It was a very like, you know, like real moment. And so that was definitely like one where I felt that, you know, like this stuff matters. And then another one has to be when we went to Tallahassee. I was like super like sleep deprived, like on like 4 hours of sleep, like because we had to go from Broward County to Tallahassee, and so we had like a whole busload of you know, students who went to Tallahassee, and we proposed the peace plan for a safer Florida, and just we literally walked the plan to the governor's office, and we printed out the plan. We literally like gave it to the secretary and like had it on his desk. And we had like a whole like little thing, and just like doing that and then walking out and like all of like the work like researching bills and like reaching out to legislators, and like just like having like 9 weeks of work like on the governor's desk, like it was powerful, and so like that was definitely like the two moments where it's like definitely some powerful moments, and like that really you know, I mean, voting is a very sacred process. I haven't done it yet, but you know, I mean, your vote matters, and so you know, all of the people who we said this like 5 times already, but the people who represent you from president to city council to state house to senator, I mean, you have the power to, with your vote or with your, you know, lobbying or whatever, you have the power to influence their mind and to put people in office who will represent your values. And so as young people, you know, we need to do that. And we have to, because if we don't, the old people will. I mean, if you like it or not. I mean, because they always show up to vote. So I mean, if young people can show up to vote and we can get all of our friends to vote, they have to listen to us. And so, you know, definitely off those moments of those powerful moments, definitely, you know, keep me in this fight, and keep me going, because, you know, that's what we need.
And if we can get everyone to vote, our youth, all the way to everyone across the intergenerational spectrum, then that's a win for America and that's a win for all of us. And Logan, that's a great transition to the next question, which is for Raymond. Raymond, besides the presidential election, and with refraining from naming any candidates in particular, are there any particular races that you're paying close attention to on the local or state level?
Sinan, yes, I am. I'm looking forward to, most importantly, the Florida House District 101 election. I am looking forward to the election in District 18 in Palm Beach County for the House of Representatives in the United States. I am looking forward to District 1 up in Pensacola. I'm looking forward to that election. Those are some local elections that I'm looking forward to. Here in Broward County, I'm looking forward to House District 101, which is Miramar, West Park, Hollywood, Hollandale, Pembroke Pines. Those are some of the elections I'm looking forward to, at least here in Broward. I'm also looking forward to the special school board election to see who's going to fill the school board at large seat, taking Robin Bartleman's seat, who's been elected to the House of Representatives, or is going to be elected to the House of Representatives. Those are some of the races I'm looking forward to here in South Florida, and I can't wait to see how they play out.
Great, thank you, Raymond. Noah or Logan?
There's a lot of great races across the state. You know, here in Broward County, being so heavily Democratic, so many of the races themselves are decided in the August primary, through either the universal primary contest system, or just based on the sheer fact that Democrats outnumber Republicans in many of these legislative districts here in Broward County. But if we go a little bit further south towards Miami-Dade, there's a couple of important races I'm keeping an eye on. Number one being Senate District 39. You know, the balance of power in the Florida Senate is extremely narrow. Both parties hold relatively about the same number of seats. And so every single race, especially a race as competitive as District 39, is being watched very closely. It is largely expected to be the most expensive race in the entire state of Florida this year, outside of the presidential race. A couple others, the Miami-Dade mayor's race. Carlos Jimenez is termed out and is running for Congress himself. And we have a matchup between two county commissioners, two really titans of Miami-Dade County. And then one other race is for House District 105, which covers the west side of Miami-Dade, slivering into Broward County and a little bit over to the west coast of Florida as well. It's an extremely gerrymandered district that has flipped back and forth a couple of times over the past couple of terms. So it's going to be really interesting to see who comes out on top in that election.
So far, you've given the voters a lot to research and a lot to be excited about besides the top of the ticket. Logan, would you like to share any races you're paying attention to?
Oh, most definitely. Definitely District 39, like Noah mentioned, definitely like that is the swingiest of swing districts in in Florida. Also District 9 in Seminole County is also one of those very competitive races where, you know, Democrats can I believe it'd be a 21-19 majority for Republicans, which would make it a lot harder for Republicans to pass off. And like the House is dominated like by 20 seats for Republicans. They've held a supermajority since 1996. So, you know, just chipping away at that majority to pass some actually good legislation for once, not some like anti-protesting stuff. But also, so in Coral Springs, we Coral Springs Commission seat 3. Where there's 6 candidates in my city. You know, variety. There's a Republican. There's a couple independents. There's 2 or 3 Democrats. And definitely looking forward to that. I'm actually on one of the campaigns. So Nancy Mateo for Coral Springs Commission. But I mean, yeah, really looking forward to seeing the future of Coral Springs, my city. Also, you know, progressives to municipal seats. So Pinellas Sheriff. There's a really interesting opportunity to have I believe his name is Santana, who's challenging the chairman of the MSD Commission. He supports like the current sheriff of Pinellas County, like supports like Army teachers, all that kind of stuff. Refuses to have background check body cameras for his officers. And there's a progressive who's running against him, which is a very interesting race there. Miami-Dade mayor, also school board Miami-Dade. There's Luisa Santos, who's a very, very great candidate there and pretty competitive race. And also, obviously, there's a lot of swing districts in the House. I can't name all 20 or so swing districts because I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but I know that District 93 is the only Republican seat in Broward County. So that's a very interesting race right there. I mean, like there's definitely a ton of races that I'm watching, as well as the presidency, as we all are. But I mean, yeah, like local elections, it's tight, and there's not as much money, so there's not as much people hearing about it. But there's definitely some very interesting races happening in Florida across the state that will be on your November ballot as well as the presidency.
Thank you so much, Logan, and thank you, Noah and Raymond, for pushing some races that our voters can pay attention to and get excited about. This next question is for Noah. Noah, how can we increase civic education in schools across our country?
Well, we can start by electing members of our school board who prioritize civic engagement as part of curriculum. I mean, you know, you want to talk about local races that matter. You know, your school board has an incredible amount of influence over the curriculum in your schools. But along with the governor's race, because the governor appoints, we used to elect a commissioner of education as a statewide elected office. It's now appointed by the governor. And so it matters who your governor is and who they appoint as a commissioner of education. But education is a very localized issue. It always has been in this country since its founding. And so it matters who you elect to your school board. And so, you know, the focus recently in school board elections has mostly been about, you know, how are schools going to handle COVID, school safety in, you know, especially in this era, you know, and then teacher pay and teacher funding. But one thing that's often left out of the conversations in these races is about the curriculum in the schools. What is being prioritized? What is being taught? What kinds of programs is the school board and the school district sponsoring when it comes to education, civic engagement education especially? Is your school board partnering with your local supervisor of elections office to bring members of that office into high schools to register people to vote? In the state of Florida, you can pre-register to vote the day you turn 16 years old. So there's a need for that as well. In addition to the fact that registering to vote is now an online process. There's not a form, so it's a very simple thing that can be done in schools. So it's a question of priorities. It's a question of, are we going to ensure that we elect the right members to the school board who care about civic engagement? But it also just becomes a part of conversations like these. It's about talking to your friends. Often, I hear a lot of times from people, well, I'm just not that into politics. I really don't care, or variations of that. Listen, here's the fact. When you go to rent an apartment, your landlord cares about politics. He cares about the policies that govern him. But when you get a job, your employer cares about politics. He cares about, if he has to pay for your health insurance or not. Everything you do in your life is affected by politics. Nobody gets to sit out. So conversations like these are extremely important when we can reach the people that don't believe they have a stake in the game. I promise you they do. And so conversations like these are really important in promoting civic engagement.
That is so true, Noah. We have to make sure that we keep education and civic engagement as a top priority. And that is definitely a great avenue to do that. Logan and Raymond, feel free to jump in on the topic of civic education in our schools and in our country.
Yeah, I mean, definitely school board matters for that. But also your supervisor elections. They can also expand, voting resources in the schools. We can't do it now because COVID. So it's not actually. I think in-person school started in Broward today. But I mean, earlier or years prior, the SOE office would sometimes do like occasional, voter education drives, like during lunches during high schools. Not anything like robust. Definitely if we elect, young people to SOE offices, or even or qualified people who actually will make strands to young voter outreach, that definitely can help get young people educated, as well as civics courses and that kind of stuff by schools. But also, school clubs definitely play a role in that. With March for Less Parkland, part of what we do is we try to, we try to engage young people, people in all the high schoolers in the process. But also, like hosting voter registration drives, education around the primaries and elections. We can't do it now because we're all online or socially distanced in school. But if this was a normal year, which it is very not, we would be hosting voter registration drives and trying to put up flyers in schools about make sure you register to vote for the election, because it's like Noah said. Like all of these issues you may not care, but the people who have a say, or the people who impact you, they care. And so everything's political is what I like to think, is that for young people, existing is political with the issues that we face as a generation, with college debt and climate change and all these issues that is uniquely to young people. And so definitely also just like educating yourself is a way to very easily for as a young person to learn more too.
Thank you, Logan. Raymond, anything additional you'd like to add about civic education?
I most definitely do. I feel this question is right up my alley, Sinan. And the two gentlemen have provided very, very good answers. And as someone who is interested in school board politics, someone well subscribed to it, I will tell you that we are trying our best within our schools, within Logan got it down to the T as he talked about civic engagement within civic classes, U.S. history classes, AP U.S. history classes, economic and government classes are where these conversations begin. But to even go as further as to say, when we stop polarizing the issue of voting, when we start knowing that voting is not something that should be polarized, and start to think of it as a fundamental right for every American, that's when we will have a good voter turnout. That's when we can have conversations about voting. Look, there are so many things that we can do, and I feel this is a perfect platform for me to begin to educate on how we are getting out the vote to young people. There is a group that's working with Michelle Obama. Her group, I believe it's Get Out the Vote, and they are working tirelessly in Broward County to get students to vote, to get schools to vote, to get SGAs involved and get their students excited to vote. That's what we need. That's how we increase civic education. To even go further than that now, we need to be the ones having these conversations, having these platforms where we are purposely, mindfully educating voters, especially our students, on the consequences of these elections. Let's not just talk about, well, this is the Democratic plan. Let's talk about this is the Democratic plan, the Republican plan, the Libertarian plan, the American Freedom plan. We need to educate every student on the different plans, because just because there's overarching values doesn't mean those values go to every student. Just because climate change is something that matters to everyone, the way climate change is addressed by Republicans might not be the same it's addressed by Democrats or the Libertarian Party. And that's where we come in to be the mitigators and to discuss the difference between all those different political parties. That's how we increase civic education. And that's how we get out the vote, Sinan.
Thank you so much, Raymond. And Raymond, you mentioned Michelle Obama's group, When We All Vote, and there are so many great organizations promoting voting in our country. So I just want to recognize all of those organizations. And I have to say that over the next 5 weeks, we have many youth leaders representing those organizations who we've invited to join us as well. So we'll be hearing from them. And I appreciate you mentioning that, Raymond. Logan, this next question is for you. Logan, what should be done to make sure that everyone has proportional representation in government, regardless of their age, gender, race, or socioeconomic status?
I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done. What we see in the legislature is a lot of these districts are gerrymandered, and so you have I believe like District 70 looks like it's like a squiggly line Tampa, and it goes down. It's like literally like that thin, and it's just these districts are drawn very, very weird. So it's very hard to have representation when the districts are so widely drawn, and to cut out certain populations and to have certain safe districts and red districts and blue districts. So gerrymandering has a lot of problems for the legislature. To have equal representation, those populations have to vote, and those people have to elect people that represent them. And so the voting block in Florida, it tilts to older white people. It tilts to the 65 plus retirees who moved to Florida. And so in a lot of those districts, that's the people who vote, that's the people that decide the elections, and so that definitely plays a part. If we get POC people out to vote, if we get these voting blocks out, then you're going to see you're going to see representation among elected officials, and so I don't have all the answers. There's definitely a lot of places. There's definitely a lot of things to play in different things, but definitely if make sure you vote. There's also other aspects, but make sure you do your part in making sure that you elect the right people.
Thank you, Logan. Noah and Raymond, if you want to jump in on this topic.
Yeah, so gerrymandering is a huge part of it, because we're not all equally represented in government when we have gerrymandering. it's a disgusting practice that is utilized to quash voters' voices. There are some states, here in Florida, our legislative maps for both the congressional level and at the state legislature level are drawn by the state legislature themselves. There's an inherent bias, no matter what party is in control, to write the maps that will, if you're in charge of writing your own maps, there's a good chance that you're going to write them to favor yourselves. The founding fathers tried to set up a system of government that would ensure checks and balances from one branch of government to the other. And a system where legislators get to choose their voters instead of voters getting to choose their legislators is the exact kind of problem that our founding fathers envisioned. And so I'm a big advocate for, redistricting reform to include independent commissions, independent bipartisan commissions, to be the ones who redraw the maps instead of legislators themselves. And then there's, kind of a bigger topic to be heard and to be discussed about things like the United States Senate. Why does California, a state with population, hundreds of times bigger than Montana or Wyoming, get the same type of representation? Well, back in 1776, there was this big emphasis over states' rights and ensuring that states had equal representation. But the fact of the matter is that, almost 300 years later, we live in a different world. We live in a different country. And the concept of allowing two people to represent a state like Texas and two people to represent, a state like Arkansas, to me, really just doesn't make sense anymore. But I believe in the power of one person, one vote, and our legislators need to actually uphold that value.
I appreciate both Noah and Logan, both of you, for bringing up the topic of gerrymandering and really digging deep into this issue of making sure that our government is inclusive for everyone. Raymond, do you have anything to add on this topic?
Yeah, I do. Most definitely do. Well, look, the first thing I think how we get people to vote and get people to vote in numbers and increase representation in proportions we haven't seen in this country is definitely redraw the maps. And that goes without saying. It's definitely to provide more representation based off of populace like the founding fathers wanted. Let's remember, Texas and California were not states during the Constitutional Convention. Let's remember, Florida wasn't a state during the Constitutional Convention. Let's remember, the whole West Coast, Midwest, were not states during the Constitutional Convention. And thus there needs to be systematic change in this country as it regards voting. But let's stop talking about the obvious and let's talk about things that are being ignored. And that's that we have active voter suppression in states like Georgia and in Florida, where we Florida citizens have voted that felons should have the right to vote. Our governor has made that almost virtually impossible because now they have to pay off fines from prison and court fees and things like that are virtually impossible to pay off because it's so hard to find a job out of prison. What we need to talk about is ensuring that voters everywhere have the opportunity to always vote. Let's stop voter registration deadlines. We should be able to register when we vote. We should be able to register to vote whenever we'd like to vote, instead of there being a cutoff date, because there are a lot of voters in remote areas who can't get access to know when the voter registration deadline is cut off. And now it's cut off and they don't have a voice to be heard. Let's think about rural Americans that are in areas that don't even know when the sun comes up until the chicken crows. Those are the people that we need to make sure that they are effectively being heard in society. And all we've seen the last 50 years, last 100 years, those people have been neglected by the elections process. And Logan, Noah, Sinan, myself, we are telling our government, we are telling adults, this can happen no more in America. Every person needs to have a vote. We modeled this system after Greek democracy. And in Greek democracy, every citizen had a vote, even the slave. Let's get our act together. Let's start making other people able to vote.
Thank you, Raymond, and thank you to each of you for speaking so deeply on this topic. This next question is for Noah, and I just want to mention when Noah came on our youth advisory forum as a keynote speaker through my nonprofit, he spoke very deeply on this topic, and there were youth who reached out who wanted to hear more of his insight on it. And the question is, what can we do to avoid political polarization and engage in compassionate civil discourse?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And this is an area of debate where I think the debate even itself gets started on the wrong foot. And what I mean by that is discussions are not discussions about polarizing issues or discussions with people who come from a different worldview are not about trying to convince somebody of even one point. I always approach discussions like these trying to find a piece of common ground. And that common ground doesn't always have to be a piece of policy. That common ground could be a piece of shared history. You both come from the same town, or your parents maybe grew up in the same town. Maybe both like the same sports team, the same sports player. That is how we cut through the polarization. It is not by saying, well, I agree to disagree with your policy. It has nothing to do with policy or politics at all. It is about the humanity in each and every one of us, because that is how we have conversations. Look, I'm a college student. There are people here with all sorts of opinions who come from all sorts of backgrounds, every state in this country, and over a dozen countries worldwide. People have a lot of opinions, and they like to share them. But I have conversations with all of these people and are friends with many of them, even those who vehemently disagree with everything that I stand for, and I then, disagree with them. But it never has to mean that the conversations we can't have, that we can't have conversations. And that not every conversation has to be political or policy based. But finding that common ground, the humanity in one person or another, is how you can eventually come to have those difficult conversations. And they're not easy. It's not as easy as just snapping your fingers. But if we start and approach it from the humanitarian aspect, that is how we can have some of those tougher conversations. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Noah, and I agree. If we believe that everyone has the right intention to get to the right solution for everyone and have mutual respect and kindness, then we're on our way to a better country and better to bridge our communities together. So thank you, Noah. Logan and Raymond, do you want to share or contribute anything on that topic?
Yes, Sinan. And so I agree 100% with Noah in the aspect that we have to find the humanitarian aspect of this. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all bleed one color, red. And we're not bleeding blue for Democrats. We're not bleeding red for Republicans. We bleed red because at the end of the day, we're all humans. We all have likes. We all have dislikes. We're all from different places. I mean, in this call alone, I'm sure there are so many different nationalities represented. And I make up two of those different nationalities as both the immigrant of a Cuban grandmother and a Bahamian grandfather. And my mother's American. My father was born in the United States, but his parents are from their respective countries. And each of you might have a different story than I do. But it's the fact that we've allowed politics in America to become about, well, here's the Republican way of thinking and here's the Democratic way of thinking, instead of thinking, here's what's best for our country. If we look at issues that are so polarized, like gun violence in America, I'm a victim of gun violence. My father, when I was 7 years old, was shot in front of me and my brothers, and my mother when we were leaving a home, when we were leaving a Christmas ceremony, because my mother's a teacher, and we got home and we were robbed at gunpoint. But instead of Americans thinking about what's most important, which is the safety of children, instead of arguing policy that allowed us to protect our kids, we argued that we need to maintain guns because it's a fundamental right of every American. We cannot allow ourselves to become so polarized that we forget about each other. We forget about the well-being of each other. Let's look at this whole pandemic. We don't wear masks because it's become a polarized issue. And how we don't make things polarized is we find the common ground of where humanity lies. So if we know that this disease is killing people, we put on our masks to protect each other. If we know that the AK-47 is shooting our students while they're in school learning to make themselves better, we take the guns off the street. Let's not make anything polarized. Let's make everything humanitarian, because that's the United States. That's what we pride ourselves on, being the most humanitarian country in the world. And yet we are so polarized that we can't even look at each other. Let's stop doing that. Let's make sure that we find the common ground, that we're all humans. And at the end of the day, we weren't born Republican. We weren't born Democrat. We were born as a human being, and we were born to help each other on this planet.
Thank you, Raymond, for sharing that personal experience. And you're absolutely right. We need to come together now more than ever for our common humanity. So I appreciate your answer to that question. Logan, would you like to share anything on this topic?
Both Noah and Raymond mentioned, we aren't born Democrat or Republican. We're born as Americans. I think we need to understand that. I think we all need to remember that sometimes, that we definitely forget it. I would imagine, I would hope that, most Republicans, Democrats are both, they both want what's right for our country. They all want America to succeed, one way or another, and one issue or another they support. Raymond brought up the issue of guns, and I think that from what I've seen is that guns is played as this very hot issue, and it's about Second Amendment versus gun control. I honestly don't think it's that at all. I think that if we want to actually save lives, there are public health measures that we can take that aren't even political, that we can take, that we know for a fact that research has shown, and that scientists and these people who do this work show that if we take a public health approach, so that means making it harder for someone. If someone shouldn't have a gun, they shouldn't get it. Once they have it, then they should be held accountable, and they should be, if they have mental health issues, that they should have that gun taken away. If someone's shot, then we should have easy access to medicine, or to hospitals and medical use. Guns isn't. At least I don't think as guns as political as as both parties make it out to be. I think that we're all Americans. I think we need to respect each other a little bit more. There's definitely been a divide amongst stuff. Also the polarization of certain issues definitely worries me a lot. From one party or another. We can all get along on some issues, I would imagine. And that what's good about America is that we can talk about this, and we can have these discussions, and we can have those debates and those conversations to figure that kind of stuff out.
I appreciate the three of you for being here and having compassionate discourse, and also agreeing on many of the issues. But one thing we can agree on is that we have to be respectful of one another and our common humanity. So I definitely appreciate that. We are coming to the end of our very first panel of Activate the Youth Vote. But before we go, I want to give each of you a chance to quickly give some concluding remarks, but also if you can answer the question of, will we be able to activate the youth vote on November 3rd? Raymond, would you like to go first?
Yes, Sinan. Can you just repeat the question? I don't know. My audio cut out just at
no worries.
The middle.
The question is, will we be able to activate the youth vote on November 3rd?
Look, as someone who speaks and is an active representative for Generation Z, which is that youth vote you're talking about, oh yeah, I believe we'll be able to activate it in numbers we haven't seen before. Because I believe that every youth in America understands the peril of this election. They understand what can occur on either side, And they have made up in their minds the decisions that they make now will forever affect each and every one of us going forward. 4 years might not seem like a lot of time, but trust me, a lot can be done in 4 years. A lot can be done in 4 years. Take a look at the last 4 years, and here's my concluding remarks. Take a look at the last 4 years and think about the next 4 years going forward. Many of us in this call will be going to college in just 2 years. Many of us watching have already begun our lives or are already in college. And many of us soon will be deciding who our wives, husbands will be. And the issues that matter or might seem minuscule today are going to be so important tomorrow. And so guess what? I'm encouraging each and every youth that can vote, that can influence a vote, to do that. I'm asking that every person in America who's eligible to vote, to get out and vote, whether that be in your living room, early voting, or on election day. If you can be a poll worker, do that. If you can get on a phone banking shift and help people, remind them to get out the vote, do that. If you can work in local government to help count ballots, if you can work in local government to do anything of the like, do it. And most importantly, this November, think about your life in 4 years and think about the lives of those who you will produce and who you will be responsible for in the next 40 years. Make your decision based off of that. Thank you so much, Sinan.
Thank you, Raymond. Logan, same question to you.
I mean, yeah, I definitely think that I think that Gen Z is a very unique generation. We are one of the most engaged generations basically ever. We were brought up in some very turbulent times. I'm 16. We literally are in a global pandemic. I had a mass shooting when I was 13. We have the impending climate crisis the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. Once we get to college, we can't afford, if we have student loans, that kind of stuff. It matters. And I would hope that, our generation is engaged. I think that we are. I think it just comes down to, educating people on how they vote, and the priorities that matter and that affect them. A lot of people might say that, oh, it's just one vote. I don't need to vote. I don't need to request my ballot. I don't need to go out on November 3rd. I'm not going to make a difference. And I think that people care to an extent. I think it's just that they don't think that that their vote matters. And so I think that's what it comes down to. I think it's just turnout in that aspect, of just, we need to teach these people. We need to show these people that, yeah, your vote can make a difference. The Coral Springs mayor race came down to like 1,500 votes, and that was a special election with only like 9,000 turnout. Like, that was like, if young people vote in an election, they could decide who the next mayor of Coral Springs is. Like, it's very simple. I'm very confident that the work that March for Lives does, definitely COVID kind of put a wrench in everything, like most of our plans for this year. But we, in the beginning of this year, we laid out that we want to have the highest youth voter turnout in any election. And so, not all those efforts in the plans that we made could turn out how we like them to be. But we definitely made strands to engage those young people and to get them registered and get them engaged and educated. And I think that, part of also the march back in 2018, that definitely engaged a ton of people. And so, I'm very confident that young people will turn out. And I think that, I think we need to, because like the issues I mentioned earlier, our lives are at stake and our futures are at stake. So I'm pretty confident we're going to care.
Thank you, Logan. Noah, your concluding remarks. Will we be able to activate the youth vote, and your final push for today to energize voters across the country?
Well, thank you always, Sinan, for having me on. just love watching the way you work and everything that you've been doing within our community. It really is quite tremendous. So keep that up. Thank you to Logan and Raymond for joining me. You know, there's a show in the early 2000s, one of the greatest television shows ever created, called The West Wing. And there was an episode where a little girl walks into a campaign office with a sign that says, "Doesn't matter who you vote for, make sure you vote." And Will Bailey is one of the characters on the show, says that he liked the sentiment, but he thought it did matter who you voted for. So he said, well, what if you wrote, "No matter who you vote for, make sure you vote"? And that's the sentiment that I bring here tonight, and that's the sentiment that I think everyone should kind of believe in. You know, it does matter who you elect. It matters who you vote for. You should learn about the candidates that are running for office in your city, your county, your legislative district, in your state, and in your country. It matters who you send to Fort Lauderdale and Tallahassee and Washington, D.C. But that doesn't mean that, you know, that we can't have conversations about getting out the vote for everyone. The conversation we're having tonight, we absolutely can activate the youth vote. We are seeing engagement from young people in a way that our country has not seen in a long time. Because the fact is that there's just too much at stake. Many of the areas of interest that Logan just mentioned are on the ballot. You know, while it is important who we send, you know, who we elect to these various offices, the issues themselves are never going away. And so it's the issues that we're voting for. You know, you walk into that voting booth and it doesn't say climate change on the ballot, but the people that you're electing have a stance, have policy positions on climate change. And so that matters. So it does matter who you vote for. I encourage everyone who is able and eligible to get out the vote, early vote, or go to your precinct on November 3rd. Because if we all all who are eligible cast their vote, then at the end of the day, the will of the people is heard. And that is the purpose of our democracy. And that is the purpose of our country.
Thank you so much to the three of you for joining me today to activate the youth vote. We have 4 more panels up until November 3rd, and one of those is a post-election panel. But Noah, Logan, Raymond, you are exceptional youth leaders. It's been a pleasure hosting the three of you. And Noah, and just the same sentiment that you said. 1, we love the West Wing. But 2, after November 3rd, we're still America. We're still here. And we're still going to be united as communities across the country and as the United States of America. So thank you to the three of you for being here. And our next panel will be next Friday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be hosting Sari Kaufman, Gianna Breyer, and Anand Veluvali. So thank you everyone for tuning in. And before you end off, there'll be a short video of information for you to take with you.